F1 is back upon us, and while the anticipation and energy might not be as high as year one, it isn't any less divisive in year two. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we're talking with Nehme Abouzeid. He's the former marketing executive for the Sphere, Vegas Golden Knights, Wynn, the Venetian, just to name a few. We ask him if F1 is all it's cracked up to be and how marketing in our city is a curious art. Oh, and after the interview, CityCast's Andreas Lenzi will be joining us for a conversation with Aaron Berger. He's the executive director of our local gem, the Neon Museum. There's more in our newsletter as part of our Shop Local Gifting Week, so stick around for that. It's Wednesday, November 20th. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Nehme, like any big event, money gets generated. But overall, let me just ask this question. Does F1 do more harm than good for our city?
Well, there's always that wrangling after the fact, and you do postmortems and you try to learn lessons and apply them to the following year. But, in my 21 years in Las Vegas, there were very, very, very few events that the city didn't want back. The NBA All-Star Game one year was kind of universally panned as an event that was difficult on the city. But generally Vegas is the canvas to the world, and let's brands and events really use it as the most beautiful backdrop for their event. And that's what Vegas does well. It's our stock and trade.
Sure.
So I think that net, I think that a global event like Formula One certainly does more good than it does harm, especially with the global reputation of Las Vegas. And remember, we need a continual stream of new visitors to Las Vegas. It's not always the 30% of people who come from Southern California. We need people from all corners of the globe to put Vegas on their wish list. And events like Formula One with such a global audience and 100 million viewers last year, they certainly contribute mightily to improving the brand image of Las Vegas. And that, I know firsthand, you can't underestimate sports, entertainment, hospitality, what that does for the city of Las Vegas.
Though sometimes I just get a little suspicious of things that come from, the marketing at all cost side, the branding above all else. Like the economic analysis that comes out, for example. We hear that F1 makes $1 billion and therefore it was definitely a good thing. But those numbers always seem to avoid taking into consideration that there are actual hard and psychic costs to a city. For instance, the county lost $500,000 in year one of F1. Many businesses were hurt. There's litigation, etc. Is there resistance for marketers to tell the full story? Or maybe the better way to ask that is, how do we counter these almost always rosy narratives about when big events like F1 happen?
It's true. It's a really good question, actually. I mean, I am a proud transplanted into Las Vegas. So I look at it as a resident, but then I also look at it as an executive that, needs to keep pushing good quarterly revenue numbers for whichever company I'm working for at the time, and they have to be beholden to shareholders. So you're exactly right. And in business school, we learn these things called positive externalities and negative externalities. And the human toll of F1, the construction, the traffic, the congestion, the impact to small business, they would teach in business school that those are negative externalities. And I think Las Vegas is reckoning in the aftermath of year one and the precursor to year two. Vegas is reckoning with, was it worth it? Was the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak? And there's very valid points, David. And I think that the organizer of Formula One, they've hired some of my friends in year two, the people that really know how to talk to the community, that know how to work with government officials. And so hopefully, year two of Formula One sees a more fan-friendly, resident-friendly face of the sport, and the city will embrace it a little bit more. And I hope by the end of year three, which, is their sort of initial 3-year period, I hope net people believe it did good things for the city. You know, I draw parallels. I was in Australia in January for the Australian Open tennis tournament, and the entire country of Australia puts their arm around the Australian Open and say, "This is our event." They're super proud of it, and the entire 2 weeks I was there, everyone, in Melbourne talked about how proud they were of the Australian Open and the beautiful amount of tourism that it generates for Australia through tennis. And, I think Formula One should, on its best day, should be something like that for Las Vegas.
It's still curious to me. You mentioned branding, and certainly there were a lot of impressions. People all over the world watch F1, but I can't imagine that there are too many of those individuals who have never heard of Las Vegas, who don't know what Las Vegas has to offer. And F1 is just 3 days a year, and not all the people who are watching it can afford to fly across the world to come and pay exorbitant fees to see the one race. So what does the branding even mean? Like, why is it so important that some of these other negative impacts, like you mentioned, aren't always considered?
It's definitely true. I mean, it's a very valid question. But for example, when I was the first chief marketing officer of the Golden Knights in 2016 and 2017, and I can draw an example. We used to say Vegas was a great place, but it was never a place to bring kids, right? And I'm sure you know that old axiom about Vegas. It's really adult playland. But when we did the NHL draft in the summer of 2017, where we drafted the expansion team, we drafted the Golden Knights team, I was outside of T-Mobile Arena. I ran into so many fathers and sons, guys bringing their 16-year-old kid, their 15-year-old kid who loved hockey. And they flew all the way from Columbus, Ohio. He said, we came just for the expansion draft to watch the Golden Knife draft their team. And that we did 11,000 people that day at T-Mobile Arena just to watch an expansion draft. And it's just an example of the trickle-down effect that these global events have. They bring a new type of customer to town. And, traditionally, if you leave it up to the casinos, it's 21 and over. But when you roll out a sport like NHL hockey, all of a sudden it's more of a family excursion. And it's the same way for Formula One. Yes, it hits more of a global audience, but that customer may have just had an image of Las Vegas of gaming tables and buffets. And however misshapen that image really is or misinformed, they needed an event, an organic content event like Formula One. It wouldn't have been done with a 30-second ad from the LVCVA. The reason it lands is because of events like the expansion draft or events like Formula One, because those people that are really diehard fans of a particular sport or music or things like that, it's a driver to Las Vegas. And so, I know firsthand, David, that you can't underestimate the effect, the positive effect of what sports and entertainment in the last 10 years has really done for Las Vegas.
Well, I mean, certainly for the Strip. I want to follow up on something you said. You mentioned that you have friends working for year two of the Las Vegas Grand Prix that weren't there year one. What has changed this year specifically from last that maybe is softening the blow?
Yeah, I think, they're doing a much better job on the communication and public relations front. I know they're more transparent with information, with websites and monthly updates, as well as rolling out, different types of ticket packages for locals. I remember a day in Las Vegas, whenever we would open a high-end restaurant in a casino, we would always invite every single employee, line level employee, would get a free meal at this high-end restaurant. Those days are kind of gone, David, but back then you believed that the 25% of the Vegas population that works for the hospitality industry, you believe that they were your best word of mouth sales force. And I think what Formula One needs to do, and to some degree, they've done that in year two, maybe not to the extent many locals want, but they need to turn the locals and the hospitality professionals into their brand evangelizers and into their word of mouth sales force. And, it remains to be seen if they've gone far enough to have the city really embrace them. We'll see, but I do think they've taken tangible steps in year two with communication, with ticket packaging, and communicating with businesses and government officials a lot better and a lot more transparently. But again, you live and learn every year, and with a lot of moving parts like Formula One, it's probably the most complicated event Vegas has ever put on, and they've learned some lessons and they've tried to apply them.
And one thing we have heard from a lot of employees and actually CEOs of hotels on this podcast is that it's good for some of the businesses on the Strip, but not for all the casinos in Las Vegas, and certainly not all the businesses in Las Vegas. So how else could F1 handle things differently so that the local population doesn't feel as strained or put upon?
They need to carve out experiences at every price point, low, medium, high. They need to give access to locals. They need to make it a festival, make it a party. They've done that to some degree with watch parties out in the suburbs that people can attend for free. There's a lot of education they need to do around the sport itself. I remember when we launched hockey, you couldn't even buy ice hockey equipment at the sporting goods store because it was basically a desert town and not a cold weather sport town. And now Vegas has embraced ice hockey, embraced pro football. It's amazing what Vegas residents can handle. And I think if you set on a path of education about your sport, you can turn Vegas residents into some of the most diehard F1 fans. So I think it's about grassroots events, access to those events, and education about their sport. And they've said that they're investing in Vegas. They want to make Vegas the Monaco of North America. And to some degree, they've done that. And if they keep going and keep providing access to locals as well as education about the sport, I think Vegas will, after a few years, come to embrace it like their own.
One of the things that happens, because F1 isn't just a weekend, it's months leading up with infrastructure and all the things that need to be put into place. But some of those things are like cutting off good tourist views of places like the Bellagio fountains and the Venetian canals and other stuff. I mean, there's a lot of work for a very long time. Do you think that the casinos are losing visitors because they're cutting off the traditional experiences in the buildup to the F1 that can go back a month, 2 months, 3 months or more?
Yeah, it's a valid point. Like October and November, where they started construction in September, whereas the first year they started in April, and there was a massive negative effect of commuters, people that needed to get to the Strip hotels to work. If you can remember in year one, the Sphere was also under construction. So that was a sort of a perfect storm year. But even this year, with the 3 months of construction, it was a major obstacle to getting to and from work. So that's super valid. I think the traditional October, November visitor would have noticed that impact and found it tougher to get around on the Strip. And then, of course, that weekend, having it the weekend before Thanksgiving, which has traditionally been a bit of a softer weekend because people are saving that travel dollar for Thanksgiving to visit their families. On the one hand, it'll drive tourism during a soft weekend, but on the other hand, the 2 months of construction may have alienated the traditional guest and the traditional visitor and impacted occupancy rates. Super valid point. We'll have to look at the numbers. If October and November were down, and if we can draw a direct cause and effect to that construction because of word got out from year 1 to 2. Super valid point. I think all in all, we need to look at the true economic impact, the human impact, and whether it's one of those events that we determine, that does more harm than good and we don't need it. I remember even a few months ago, people saying, well, people come here for the Super Bowl every year when the Super Bowl's in another city. We may actually lose money if the Super Bowl is actually in Las Vegas. I remember, in the media, people talking about that. But then February came and went and people roundly said, what an amazing Super Bowl. And so you don't really know, David, until you do it.
Yeah. What lessons do you think we could learn from the Super Bowl? Because that did seem to be far more embraced by the city for F1.
Yeah, I think the Super Bowl, I mean, the NFL was dialed in that entire week. They were doing a lot of ancillary events. You had brands like Oakley. Believe it or not, my daughter, who's a flag football player, attended a Super Bowl event with Oakley, and they did a special event, and all they did was custom sunglasses for all these junior football players in Vegas. So that kind of outreach, right? It was a free event. They treated them like VIPs, and they spotlighted like two flag football teams in the city, and they gave them custom Oakleys during Super Bowl week. And then my daughter got the chance to go to opening night and welcome Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and shake hands with every member of both teams. And so
Wow.
the NFL did some amazing grassroots outreach. And they didn't pat themselves on the back. They have this really tried and true playbook every time they go into a city for Super Bowl, and they do all this local outreach, nonprofits, community sports organizations. So I think if F1 can learn, they should tap the fan, the pint-sized toddler fan, all the way up to the silver-haired fans. They need to go every generation. They need to turn them into ardent F1 fans, and they need to do education, and they need to do outreach. And those are some of the things that the NFL did with their official sponsors and also through the NFL themselves. And it just made my daughter feel like a VIP, and it made all of our families feel like, maybe we can't afford the $5,000, nosebleed Super Bowl seat, but we felt like we touched the Super Bowl in some real way, and that we were proud it came through our town.
Do you think that the placement of all these major marketing opportunities, the stadiums, the Sphere, F1, et cetera, either on or adjacent to the Strip, is really the best for the whole valley? Or should we start thinking about like putting some of these things in other parts of the valley, bringing attention, interest, and development to the rest of our very big and ever-growing community?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's two schools of thought, right? There's the school of thought which many major cities in America now are putting all their sports stadiums side by side by side, because then you create like a central entertainment district. So there's a school of thought you do that, and then there's a school of thought where you sprinkle it all across the valley. I live in Green Valley, and I live literally probably about 1,000 feet from the atrium, which now is the minor league hockey arena, and also known as the Lee's Family Forum. And I was like pretty much family number one impacted by this. And I was initially against it because I thought that you couldn't put a 7,000 seat stadium in a dense suburban neighborhood and have positive outcomes. But after a couple years of operations, I can honestly say that the Lee's Family Forum does a really nice job managing entrance and exit. They do a nice job with parking, and I don't really feel that much negative impact, getting in and out of my neighborhood from that stadium. And so I think that we can push these things outward. However, you also balance that with the need for tourists to get from the Strip outward. And if they're driving 45 minutes to Summerlin or they're driving 30 minutes to Henderson, it does put a damper on going to those events for tourists. So there is a bit of a double-edged sword. What might be good for the local may be bad for the tourist. And unfortunately, David, the tourist oftentimes has the deeper pockets, and some of the return on investment is easier modeled out with tourist revenue rather than locals, who also has to balance the need to put food on the table and pay their rent.
And Nehme, I really appreciate you for coming on to CityCast Las Vegas.
Thank you, David. Appreciate you for having me.
And listener, don't go anywhere. In just a second, we've got a segment sponsored by the Neon Museum. Their gift shop, well, it is the perfect place to find a unique Las Vegas-themed gift. So many interesting choices. Maybe it's time to plan a visit before the holidays. Now, here's Andrea.
I'm CityCast Content Director Andrea Salenzi, here with Aaron Berger, the Executive Director of the Neon Museum here in Las Vegas. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So what is the best part about visiting the Neon Museum?
So what I love about it is that it is what you want it to be. So if you're looking for this amazing Instagram backdrop, there is nothing like that Stardust sign or an 86-foot tall guitar that's illuminated in neon behind you. There's nothing like that, or the glow of the Moulin Rouge. When I came to interview for the museum position, I was actually completely surprised to learn about the story of the civil rights movement through the Moulin Rouge sign. And it gave a real richness and a depth to a city that it was really mind-boggling to me. And it remains something that I love exploring.
So you felt like a deep connection to the collection itself.
Absolutely. And so the signs are a portal. And so with that Moulin Rouge sign, I can talk to you about the civil rights movement. I can talk to you about sign restoration itself. I can also talk to you about Betty Willis, who in the 50s was a very sought after sign designer. So that one sign leads us down the path of multiple different conversations, which is really exciting.
So if someone were visiting the museum for the first time, what are some of the areas that you recommend they check out, or where should they begin?
So when they come to the museum, they're given a choice of doing a self-guided experience through the boneyard. A boneyard is what a sign manufacturer's backyard looks like. So this is where you'll see signs stacked upon each other. You'll see various letters, various pieces in a variety of state of restoration. You also can take a guided tour, and we have 3 different kinds. We have a daytime tour that will give you some of the basics of the pieces that are on display. We have 275 signs that are out in the boneyard. Or you can do a nighttime tour, which is really tied into the history of Las Vegas. And then something we just launched, which I really love, is the Viva Las Vegas Movies Tour. So Las Vegas has been in so many movies that it's a character unto itself. And so this is a great chance to just sort of celebrate that aspect of it too. So it really is, again, it goes back to the museum is what you want it to be.
So fun. What a local treasure. What are some of the newest signs that have been added?
Just recently, we lit the Debbie Reynolds sign from the Debbie Reynolds Hollywood Hotel and Casino. And this sign is just so spectacular because it is a pink that you can see from space. It is a beautiful shade that is really unique to, in fact, Debbie Reynolds. So when she was designing the sign, and it's her signature, when she was designing it, it was, I think, 20 to 23 different variations of pink that she went through until she found the right hue that was exactly her pink.
Now, tell me about the STEAM Saturdays events. Those seem super fun.
So we strongly acknowledge and believe that it takes science, technology, engineering, art, and math in order to make a sign. So each month is a different theme that relates to that STEAM umbrella. And so we bring kids in and families in, and it's really rewarding to watch these parents and kids working together to do everything from scavenger hunts to hands-on activities. We actually teach kids how the acidity in bird poop affects the metal on signage.
So what's going on at the museum from now until the end of the year?
From my perspective, it's now is the greatest time to come experience the holidays under our lights, right? I mean, this is a wonderful venue to create that family tradition of experiencing a Las Vegas winter and enjoy it. I think the one thing to know is that this is an incredibly busy time in Las Vegas. So I just always recommend getting those tickets in advance because we do have sellouts, and it's too special to miss out on.
So now that the weather is perfect and you have all these visitors coming to town who you really want to impress, this is the perfect time to visit the Neon Museum. And while you're there, you can snag a gift membership for someone special. What an awesome gift. Aaron Berger, the executive director of the Neon Museum, thank you so much for coming on CityCast Las Vegas.
Thank you again for having me.
For more information about visiting, head to neonmuseum.org, and we'll have a link for you in the show notes as well, so you are just a click away.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend. You can also rate our show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.